This video is sponsored by Williams Academy. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my first retouching tutorial of 2025. I hope you all had a really great New Year's and holiday season, and hopefully you're just as excited about 2025 and getting into some new creative projects as I am. And I really wanted to delve straight into a tutorial today because I think that this one is highly requested amongst a lot of beauty photographers and retouchers, and skin texture always comes up as a really popular topic when it comes to asking questions and finding out more information. So as the title suggests, today's tutorial is going to be all about how to enhance skin texture in Photoshop, and there's several ways that you can do this. I actually have a few different methods that I'm going to talk about today in this video. As I mentioned, this kind of tutorial is especially helpful for beauty photographers and retouchers out there, especially for beauty photography because everything is shot so close up to a model's face. So getting that skin texture looking good is pretty important. And without further rambling, we're going to dive straight into the tutorial today, so let's get into it. So jumping straight into the first point of how you can start to enhance texture, I think it's really important to note that one of the best things you can do for skin texture is use really non-destructive methods of retouching the skin. So for example, I really love using the dodge and burn method. This is a method that I've been using for many years, and it really is considered the industry standard for skin retouching and for retouchers in general. Dodging and burning really involves adding light and dark to an image to kind of even out the skin texture when it's referring to skin retouching. So it can be a technique that takes a little while to get used to, and I do have many tutorials on my channel for dodging and burning, and if you want to check those out, there are plenty, as I mentioned, on my channel. This particular tutorial, I'm not going to focus on how to specifically dodge and burn because like I mentioned, I just have so many tutorials already on my channel, but we are going to go briefly into what it is and how it's going to really help enhance the skin texture. One of the most important things I also want to mention here is that sometimes it's not about adding skin texture necessarily, it's really about keeping the skin texture intact as much as possible, and really this is what this method of skin retouching with dodging and burning will do. So to create our dodge and burn layers, we can easily create them by going down to the adjustment layers here, and we're going to use curves. So just by getting a curves adjustment layer up, I'm going to name this one dodge. And then I'm going to lift this bar all the way up here so you can see that it really brightens the image. I'm then going to make sure this box here, which is the mask, is selected, and hold down Control-I to invert. So it's essentially just inverted that adjustment layer that we've applied in Photoshop, and it's currently invisible. So what we're going to do is actually bring that lightness back into the image, and we're going to do the same thing with a burn layer. So we'll go back to the adjustment layers, go up to curves, we're going to name this one burn. And then we're going to bring this line down so it's nice and dark. And then making sure that this mask is selected once again, hold down Control-I to invert. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to this image now, and you can see that the skin texture is quite good in this image, but again, we want to retain that, and we want to make sure it's enhanced and smoothed out just a little bit. So the best way to do this again is by using dodge and burn. So I'm going to go to the dodge layer here, and I'm just going to focus on some of these areas here in just brightening up these little parts here. So to do this, I'm going to go and select the brush tool, making sure that the brush size is quite small, hardness is at 0%. Also making sure that flow is at 1% and opacity at 100%. This is going to work best if you have a graphics tablet. Dodging and burning is much easier if you've got a graphics tablet. It's really just for the hand movements and just control overall in the image. I really prefer using a tablet for this. And then we'll go over to the brush settings over here as well and make sure that transfer is selected here with pen pressure. This is just going to give us, again, a lot more control over the retouching of the skin. So making sure the dodge mask is selected here and brush in hand, and also making sure that white is the selected color over here because we are bringing back what is on this adjustment layer because it is inverted. So the mask is currently black and we're using white to bring back that adjustment at the moment. So now I'm just going to start painting onto the image. And this is going to be a very light adjustment here, which is what we want. We want to slowly build up the brightness on this part of the skin tone. And really with using dodge and burn, it's about looking for those areas that just need that little bit more evening out. Just like this area here and here, where the light hasn't specifically hit on the skin tone. So we are just going to continue using the dodge tool here to brighten up this area. And you can see I'm not touching the skin texture at all. I'm not removing it. This is what a lot of retouchers may actually do, is they'll remove some of the skin texture by using the healing tools. But in this case, I want to keep this. We're enhancing it. So I'm just going to turn the eye on and off here so you can see what that's done. And it's a very subtle difference, but it really does help to smooth the skin texture a little bit, but still not removing it in the process, and we are enhancing it. So I'm going to continue just doing small parts of the image here so you can have a better look at how this really works. I'm going to continue using Dodge and also show you when I use the burn layer as well. Now, it's especially important to remember that specifically with this photo, we are retouching a deeper skin tone. So using the Dodge layer should really only be applied to the lightest areas here, where the highlights are really hitting the skin. For the rest of the skin tone, I'm going to switch over to the burn layer and then start to fill in any little gaps here to ensure that the skin is looking nice and textured and smooth, but at the same time, we are keeping all of this texture intact. So by using the burn tool down here, I'm not lightening the skin tone. We don't want to do that with the Dodge layer. So we'll make sure that the burn layer is selected. And if you want a little bit more power with the brush, you can simply just up the flow a little bit, and you can change your brush size whenever you need to. So just turning that on and off, you can see that that's made a really nice little subtle difference there. And you can switch between Dodge and burn as much as you like. They're both very useful for kind of evening out parts of the skin. But remembering again that we are working on a deeper skin tone, so to ensure for these types of images to use the burn tool more so. Okay, so let's take a snapshot and see what all of that dodging and burning has actually done. So this is the original, and then this is the after. So you can really see here that what is standing out on the skin tone now is the texture, whereas before there were some areas that were kind of drawing the attention away as well from the skin texture, but now it feels a little bit more uniform and your eye is drawn to it. Again, we haven't removed any of the skin texture, we have simply enhanced it. So before and after, before, after. And realistically, I could spend a lot more time doing dodging and burning. It is really a technique that you can do all day long. However, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to leave it at that and just do a really simple dodge and burn here and leave it at that for now. Now, the next method that I would use to enhance skin texture is by sharpening. And one of the best ways I feel that you can sharpen with, once again, not being too destructive to the image and the quality, is by using a high pass filter. The way I really like to use a high pass filter is by duplicating the background layer here. And then I would go up to filter, other, high pass. And then usually anywhere from 4 to 8 pixels, I would then sharpen up the skin texture. And you can sharpen the whole image by using this technique, but I'll just quickly show how you can sharpen parts of the skin texture specifically for this. So then press OK, and then change the blending mode of the layer to either overlay or soft light. I'm just going to choose overlay for now, and then you can really bring down the opacity to kind of suit where you want the sharpness of the skin texture to be. Now, to do this specifically for the skin texture and not the whole image, the best way to do this is to get a mask. So you can just click simply on this button, a layer mask, and then add that to this layer. Now, if you want to have a lot more control over this, just simply hold down Control and I and invert the mask like we did for the other curves layers. Make sure your brush is selected. White is the selected color. We're going to zoom in again. Make the brush size a little bit bigger, and you can use the same sort of brush settings as before for dodging and burning, and then just kind of bring back some of that sharpness. You can actually up the flow here as well. Just bring that back over the skin wherever you want it to look really sharp. I really like to do this specifically over the highlights because I feel like that's where it stands out more on skin texture. And then I'll just zoom out again, and you'll be able to see once I turn this on and off, it's quite a subtle difference, but just enough to really enhance it. So zooming in again, before, after, and then if you want to change the opacity and make it stronger, you can simply just push that up a little bit more. So before, after, before, after. And let's zoom out again. So let's just do a quick recap here and go back to our original snapshot. So this is the before, this is the after, and we're really starting to enhance that skin texture a lot more now. And the next technique that I'm going to show you is brought to you by today's video sponsor, Williams Academy. Williams Academy was born from well-known beauty photographer Tamara Williams, and she has released a panel directed specifically towards beauty photographers and retouchers. This panel is an all-in-one solution for your beauty retouching needs and can help cut down your retouching time and improve your workflow significantly. Now, not only has she released this panel, but Tamara has also released a number of Photoshop brush sets, which integrate seamlessly with the panel. Whether you need a brush for hair, eyebrows, makeup, or freckles, these brush sets will have you covered. So for my next method of enhancing skin texture, I'm going to show you how you can use the panel and brushes to help achieve a beautiful polished effect with the skin texture. Let's get into it. So you might have already noticed that we do have the Tamara Williams Academy panel just here on the side, and there are so many quick shortcuts that you can use with this panel. So for things like dodge and burn, like I've already spoken about today, you can easily bring those layers up already generated through the panel here. You can do global dodging and burning, which will do the entirety of the face. You can do your macro, which will be a little bit close up on the skin. So doing things like dodge and burns, a really quick selection here, and you can also work on the details of the image. There are so many things that this panel really does offer. But as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the skin texture today. And I'm actually just going to hide the high pass because I really want to show you how you can kind of enhance the skin texture in a different way, which is by using this panel and certain brushes. So if we zoom in a little bit, I'm going to focus on the skin texture portion of this panel here. So let's go to add, and we'll really focus on some skin texture highlights and maybe even the side cheek texture here. So let's go to skin texture highlight. And you can see that it's created a layer here automatically that I can paint onto and bring some of the skin texture through. So I'm actually going to move this up to the top here so it's on top. And then by having the mask selected, the brush tool selected as well, and making sure that the flow is probably sitting a little bit lower for this, I'm then going to start to paint over portions of the skin tone here. And you can see that by turning this on and off, we've created a little bit of skin texture here. So I'm just going to do some over the chin as well, but not too much. Now we'll just add another layer for skin texture and try the side cheek skin texture. And this we can really use across this area here. So I'm just going to paint gently over that, and you can see how much that really brings out that texture now. Now you do have to be careful and gentle with this kind of application process so you don't put texture where it looks funny, like especially on this area of the skin tone where there's not as much texture. As I said, it's really good to do this on the highlighted areas. So just turning that on and off, you can see that that actually really brings some texture into the shot. So this is a perfect technique to use if you feel like the skin texture in your images is not very strong, and especially in the highlighted areas, you can really use this method for that. And you can also just bring down the opacity a little bit if you want it to become a little bit softer. So this is really the process of physically adding a little bit more texture to the image, which will really help kind of bring out certain parts of the skin. And now let's go back to add. And not only do you have textures up here that you can use specifically for highlights, hand and skin, you've also got your forehead skin, forehead pores, and some other individual pores that you can actually click down here. So let's go to cheek pores individual. And this will be much better for kind of those little kind of bits here that we want to stand out a little bit even more. So just turning that on and off, you can see how much that's just added a little bit more texture into the skin. So before, after, before, after. And let's do the same with the forehead. Let's kind of move up a little bit and we'll do forehead skin here. And you can kind of just make that a bit sharper. So before, after, before, after. And you can also add in like individual forehead pores as well. So we'll make the brush a bit smaller. And that's just going to help add in that little bit more varied texture. So obviously what I've done here has been quite strong, and you can make some of these a little bit softer if you wish. So as I mentioned, you can just bring down the opacity on some of these, and I would probably just do it a little bit just to make it a little bit more subtle on some of those layers. I would then take a snapshot and we can see what that's kind of done. So as I mentioned, if you want a little bit more of a realistic take, especially with the skin tone, and personally this is what I prefer these days, I don't like to go too smooth with skin texture at all. You can just add those little bits of skin texture into the image and it makes such a difference. And there's so much control that you can have over this. It's really, really great that way. And I feel like you get that little bit more of a realistic take. So again, let's just do a quick before and after. Before, after, before, after. And this actually works really well after using Dodge and Burn too, because it just replaces any little bits of texture and a little bit more emphasis into the texture if it does look a little bit flat. After skin retouching, you can kind of bring it back even more with this section of the panel. So another really great part about this section of the panel is that you can go in and really fine tune all of these adjustments that we've just made with adding skin texture. So if I zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see here with the skin texture that it doesn't quite blend to the pores that are already on the model's face. So what we can actually do is go to the drop-down menu here and then go down to side cheek texture, which is the adjustment that we've made over here in the texture that we've added. You can then adjust the size of the texture to make it a little bit bigger, which I think in this instance we will do just to go in line with some of the other pores and texture on the model's face. You can also change the angle of light. So again, that will help blend better onto the model's skin tone. So for example, the light's just coming in a slightly different direction and we don't really want it coming from this way because it's not looking natural. So if we go to the other side, for example, that is going to blend a lot better than the other side. So we'll kind of leave it around there. And then you also have the options to reduce highlights and shadows just here. So I can click highlights off altogether if I don't want the highlights to show. However, I'm going to leave the highlights there. I'm just going to reduce them just a little bit to blend them a bit better. And then you can also remove the shadows if you want to. But again, I'm just going to reduce them a little bit so they don't look too harsh against the skin tone. And now that looks a lot better blended onto the skin. So if I actually go down to the layer here and turn this on and off, you'll see that it's just a lot better blended onto the skin. And especially compared to what it looked like before, whereas this texture looks a little bit too small, a little bit too detailed almost. This texture just blends in that little bit more. It's been made a little bit larger. And again, you can kind of reduce some of those shadows a little bit if you want it to blend even further. Now, another thing you can do to add a little bit of texture to the skin, a little bit of a fun thing that you can do, is actually add some freckles. So this is actually a really popular trend with a lot of photographers, is to add a little bit of freckles, and it kind of adds that bit more texture as well. So let's go to details and click on freckles. And this is really where you can experiment with the brushes that the Williams Academy have. So for example, let's check out this one. These brushes are so good because you can really just make them a little bit smaller as well. I tend to hold down Alt on the keyboard and kind of choose a darker area of the skin tone just to kind of make it as natural as possible. And you can change the shape dynamics of the freckles as well. So if you want to be a little bit more controlled in how you're applying them, you can easily go to your brush settings and maybe click scattering off and shape dynamics. And then you can kind of apply them a little bit more straightforward onto the skin. So I always like to do freckles a little bit more stand out initially and then kind of go in and bring the opacity down. So just by bringing the opacity down on this a little bit more, you'll be able to see that it creates a really, really soft effect. And I really love how that looks on the skin tone. Again, it just kind of gives that little bit more texture, and you can really adjust it however you like. And it really does give quite a natural effect when you change the opacity and kind of bring it down even further. So it just really depends on what you like in your images. I personally really like this. You can also just adjust the hue and saturation of it if you feel like it's too warm and maybe they need to be darker. You can kind of do that as well, and it just kind of changes the color there. But yeah, it's a really cute, fun little thing that you can do with the panel and with the brushes, and I feel like it just kind of adds, again, that little bit of texture. So going back to the before and then the after. Before, after. Before, after. If you're interested in checking out the Williams Academy panel and brushes, make sure to click the link in the description box below and use the code K10 for 10% off all products. Now back to the video. Okay then, as a final step to enhancing texture, I really like to add a grain onto my images. So it's a really, really easy way that you can do this, and I usually just duplicate the background layer. I will go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and then you can either have this selected as uniform or Gaussian. For this, I'm just going to select uniform and make sure that it's ticked as monochromatic, because if you don't tick it as monochromatic, you do get all the different colors in the noise, which isn't really what we want. We're just going to go monochromatic and give it a slightly more grain editorial kind of effect. Press OK. And then what I like to do is to soften the grain a little bit is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and really just kind of step this down to like below 2 pixels and press OK. And just so you can see how the grain has been applied, turning that on and off. It just kind of helps to fill in little bits of skin and just the entire photo in general, and give that little bit more texture. And then what I would do is actually just lower the opacity though and make it a little bit softer again. So you can really have this as heavy or as light as you prefer. I'm just going to leave it as that. And turning that on and off. You won't be able to see much from further away, but going in close. Before, after. Before, after. I feel like it really just gives a good uniformity to the skin tone overall by adding a grain as kind of like a finishing touch. But overall, these are the techniques that I would use to kind of add a little bit of texture into the image, but also to enhance the texture that is already there. So hopefully you've really enjoyed this tutorial today, and hopefully some of these tips will really help you out if you're looking to enhance skin texture in future. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial today, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure you do, because I'll be posting a lot more videos like this one. Let me know down in the comment section below if there's any specific ways you like to enhance skin texture in Photoshop, because I would love to hear your methods as well. And also make sure to hit the notification bell to see all of the updates from my channel in future. Just another quick reminder, if you're interested in checking out the Williams Academy and brushes, make sure to click the link in the description box below, and also use K10 for 10% off all products. But thank you so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.